The Duality of Aerwyn Willowsong by Lucy Martin. First, a special thanks to my partner Connor for reading every chapter as I wrote it and encouraging me through this whole process. To Ben, Jade, Michelle, Aaron, Brooke, and Richard for being the best Dungeons & Dragons group and giving me the foundations to this story. And finally, to Helena, Nancy, and all of my other nurses for supporting me and persuading me to publish this novella. Chapter 1. The Forest. She had told her friends that she was leaving for a short time to forage for druid supplies in the forest nearby the base camp. They seemed indifferent, so she cheerfully found her way to the tree line. She was not lying, as she did intend to forage. Her biggest motivation, however, was simply to feel the magic of the wild again. It was the first time that Aerwyn Willowsong had heard the beating heart of the forest in quite some time. She felt its warm energy radiate from the canopy of trees above her and the dirt beneath her bare feet. A smile spread across the wood elf's face, followed by a childish giggle. The smell of moss and leaves, accompanied by the music of the forest life, compelled the Willowsong girl to dance. She started by prancing carelessly on her feet from side to side, swinging her arms gently along with her. She was so light that anyone would have thought that she was levitating ever so slightly. Her movements were like water, gently drifting down a lazy stream. She danced in and out of the beams of sunlight that slipped through the cracks in the trees, and the warmth on her skin filled her with a feeling that she could only describe as bliss. The elf girl felt alive again for the first time in years. She was home at last. "We're free to go," Thana said bluntly, determinedly making her way down the grand stairs at the front of Professor Shalebrow's mansion. "What do you mean, free to go?" Selowith demanded. "Don't ask questions. I just saved all of our asses. We're free to go, so let's go." The rest of the party exchanged confused glances, but the stoic look on Thana's face warned them all not to push it. They walked in silence back to the small house that they had taken up residence in. Once there, they settled amongst themselves to rest before setting off in the morning. Kudo sat by the entrance to the house while Pan stood by the window, and like clockwork, they both quickly entered into sentry mode. As they were both warforged, it seemed that they had completed this routine many times before. Thana, the ASMR, isolated herself in the furthest corner of the room and rolled over to face the wall without saying a word. Aerwyn debated saying something to her, another apology, anything, but decided against it. Selowith was also quiet. She found herself a corner and sat with her eyes closed, and reviewed the events of the day in her head. Her face first read as disturbed from the happenings at Shalebrow's mansion, but puzzlingly, it turned into a sly smirk. The tiefling quickly dozed off, her head lolling to the side, and the two elves sat in front of the fire. Aerwyn turned to face Robin to talk, but he was already deep in his restorative trance. That left her as the last one awake. She stared into the crackling fire and watched the tails of the flames dance amongst each other. But every time she started to drift off into meditation, another thought of their adventure disturbed her and pulled her back to reality. She didn't show it, but Aerwyn was scared. She thought of her dear friends Natasha and Puck. They had travelled with her to the cold wastelands of peril in the first place. She pictured their grinning faces as they toasted to adventure in the charming Martin Inn in Asterloth. The next morning they would seek out the cure to her mother's sickness in a dungeon nearby. Her thoughts twisted. Aerwyn saw the mangled body of her dear friend Natasha. She remembered watching her friends fight to survive all those years ago as she, the coward, ran back to the sunlight. She abandoned them. What was worse was that the only reason that they had travelled to that dungeon in the first place was to help her find that damn fruit. After that, Aerwyn spent 2 whole years in Asterloth, and in that time she had accepted that she may never return to her home and her mother in Edvard's Rest. Then she met this strange group of 5 in the middle of a blizzard, and her hopes perked up. But what was to say that this new group wouldn't meet the same fate? She walked with them through the very same cave that she had watched her previous companions perish. This party were lucky to have survived. But what if they hadn't? She cared for these people deeply, even though she had just met them. She imagined Pants and Kudo's dismembered metal body parts strewn about, their blank faces deactivated. She imagined Selowith hung by her horns and her tail, persecuted as her kind used to be many years ago. She saw Thana's rings brutally ripped from her body. She saw the decapitated head of Robin on a pike, and she saw herself running away from them like the coward that she was. Her eyes flew open, and she released a breath that she didn't realize she had been holding. There, Robin sat behind her, Kudo at the door and Pants at the window. In her sleep, Thana had rolled over to face the group, and her face looked more at peace than Aerwyn had ever seen it. Selowith had fallen asleep sitting up, as though she had intended to stay on guard but couldn't resist the temptation of rest. Aerwyn felt a gentle smile grow on her face. She hadn't known these people for long. She thought that they were quite peculiar when they first met. A strange group of races all hiding in a hole in a blizzard. Aerwyn had grown up almost exclusively around druids, and by no means such a diverse group of people. Nonetheless, she found herself drawn to them straight away, and now she would consider them family. She fiddled with the woven friendship bracelet on her wrist for a moment. She remembered the boat as they travelled back from the freezing, harsh tundra of peril to the base camp that they were at now. There had been tension among her new friends, and Aerwyn realized that despite Thana's tough exterior, she had truly been victimized by the group. She thought to reconcile the situation by bringing them together, and what better way to do that than to braid friendship bracelets? As their adventure continued, the bracelet meant a great deal to Aerwyn. It symbolized her new friends, her new family. She scanned the room one last time at all the faces of her friends illuminated by the dying fire, before resolving to take a walk back to the forest to clear her head. That was, after all, where she felt the most at home. She stood and tiptoed over to the door, and as she began to open it, Kudo suddenly became aware of the movement and looked at Aerwyn with a puzzled face. "I'm just going for a walk. I'll be back soon," Aerwyn whispered. Kudo stared at her for a moment before shrugging and saying okay, and falling back into sentry mode. With that, Aerwyn closed the door and carefully stepped into the night. It had not escaped Aerwyn's mind that the base camp was not the friendliest of places, especially at night. During the day, it had been easy enough for her to waltz right out the gate into the forest. But as the moon rose, the gates were shut tight and would open to no one. Aerwyn had known she had never been stealthy normally, but with a little help from her magic. As she came close to the tall wooden wall that enclosed the base camp, she ducked into the shadows of a nearby house and watched. There were 2 guards posted in towers either side of the gate. She also saw guards patrolling along the wall. "Hide my footsteps, shroud my face, allow me to pass without a trace," Aerwyn whispered. She felt a great shadow cloak her body. She crouched and ran towards the door to one of the towers. Slowly, she creaked it open. Inside was a wooden staircase leading up to the top of the tower where the guard was. As Aerwyn slowly tried to close the door behind her, a quick gust of wind forced the door closed a little louder than Aerwyn would have liked. "Huh?" She heard a deep voice from upstairs. Aerwyn moved and pressed herself into the furthest corner underneath the staircase. In a moment, she saw an orc wearing a guard's garb and holding a torch run down the stairs to investigate the sound. "Hello?" the guard called, opening the door slightly and looking around. Aerwyn seized the opportunity. While the guard's back was turned, she ran up the stairs to the top of the guard's tower and looked over the side to the forest. It was about a 10-foot drop. She took a deep breath and jumped.